All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our May open mic night. Tonight, we are joined by Arman Milanian with Ray-Honay Farm, as well as Dandelion Foodscapes. And he's going to speak with us a little bit about stormwater management on urban farms. But before we get to Arman, we have a special guest with us this evening. Carolyn Bullis from University of Maryland. But I just wanted to mention a few things, a few announcements before we get to Carolyn, and then I'll kick it over to her. We are just to remind folks, we are skipping open mic nights for June, July, and August, and we'll return in September. So if you have ideas for fall programs, please let me know, or if you're interested in speaking on a specific topic, let me know. And then we'll take another break in December. So just letting folks know a little bit about the plan. We're going to do a little break this summer because we've noticed in the past that the numbers start to drop off then, and because you all are busy working on your farms. Also just wanted to put a plug in for our spring seedling giveaway and vendor fair on June 3rd. It's at Darnell's Chance House Museum, which is around the corner from our office. We have purchased some seeds from Ujamaa Cooperative Farming Alliance, and Park and Planning are growing those seedlings out. We'll be giving those away. But we're also going to have a variety of vendors, and we have a few urban farmers that will be vending with us. So if you're interested, let me know. I'll drop the link to this in the chat box shortly. And actually, our Miss Linda will be giving a talk as well on teas. And that is it for the moment. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just turn it over to Carolyn, who's going to talk a little bit about a project that she's working on and would love some feedback from y'all. So I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn, let her introduce herself and her project.
Hi, thank you so much, Kim and Arman, for letting me be here. I'm just going to take 1 minute. So like I said, I'm Caroline Bullis. I'm at the University of Maryland, and I am on this project that we just got funded by NSF a few months ago, and we're actually partnering with the Food Equity Council. Sydney Daigle, if you know her, was on our project until she left us. But what the project is, it's a very, very broad project, kind of just like looking at the whole food system, and we're using Prince George's County as our pilot case, basically. So for the first year, we're trying to kind of just understand the food system, understand problems or gaps in access and in resources and coordination and communication sort of across the food system, with a focus on food insecure populations as receivers and a focus on sort of supporting local food. And so it is very broad, and it's a really big team. And my part of it is urban agriculture, because that's kind of what I do. And so I have been really, really trying to say, we need to really try to support urban ag, look at urban ag as kind of a potential solution for food insecurity in the county. So basically what we're doing for the first year is collecting a ton of information through focus groups with food insecure populations, and then with urban farmers. And then there's people like on the technical side that are going to try to develop tools, or I don't know, apps or tools or something kind of at the end of the year that might try to, solve some of the problems. But what I'm doing is kind of trying to understand what the problems are from urban farmers' point of view. So I am trying to organize a set of focus groups to ask just kind of general questions about distribution, production, kind of like gaps in information, communication, coordination, like how do you make decisions about what to grow? How do you make decisions about where to distribute? What kinds of tools or information would help you in making those decisions? What are some of your biggest problems? So just very kind of general things like that, so that we can try to kind of design some solution at the end. So it's very broad, but I am trying to do a set of focus groups with urban farmers. The problem is it needs to be in June and July, just because of the timing of the project, which I know is a really, really tough time. So I'm just here to let you know that I'm going to be trying to do these, and if you're interested in participating, just send me an email. I haven't scheduled anything yet. I can't technically start yet because I don't have my IRB approval yet, but I'm hoping within the next week or two I will get it. We do have money, so we'll be offering incentives, $75 gift cards for each participant. I don't even know what the gift card's going to be yet. I think we're looking at doing Tango or Amazon or something, maybe. I don't know. If people have ideas or if you have preferences, you can let me know. But anyway, so each participant will get a $75 some kind of gift card that I hope will be useful. And they will be like 60 to 90-minute focus groups, 6 to 8 people each, hoping to do maybe 5 or 6 in the next 2 months. So if you have the time and you're interested in participating, just send me an email, and then I'm going to try to organize them kind of based on, interest and information that I get. And if you have any ideas, so just send me an email if you have ideas about how I can advertise. I know Kim generously said she would help us advertise, but if you have any other ideas, and then I'll have like a recruitment email at some point, or I'll just send an email out to people that I know and send it to Kim, and then you can send it out to all your, friends or other people that that can participate. So anyone who's doing farming in Prince George's County pretty much would be eligible. Farming or gardening. I mean, we're mostly talking about food, so I think it's going to be mostly focused on food and mostly for some kind of commercialization or donation. So probably not really subsistence. But if you are selling or donating food items anywhere, then you would be eligible. That's it. Any questions, I guess?
Caroline, I have a question.
Yeah.
So will you be doing this via Zoom, or are you having a focus group all at once, or how are you doing this?
That's a good question. I was wanting to do them in person because I feel like in person kind of is more like a comfortable environment, but I do feel like Zoom is so much easier for people now.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know. Do you suggest Zoom?
Either one works for me. Some people work from home, some don't, some, are more flexible. I can do either.
Okay. I was kind of hoping to do them in person because I kind of think like it's just more comfortable in person, but I understand it's a very, very, very busy time for you all. And so I wanted to make it as easy as possible. So I'll probably ask for feedback if people email me, and I can be flexible. If Zoom is a lot easier, we can do Zoom.
Okay. All right.
So my name and my email is in the chat, and thank you for people who sent some comments in here.
Hey, Caroline, if you do them in person, where do you think you would hold them?
This is mine.
I don't know. I guess I would kind of try to organize people in some central location, depending on, it's kind of just going to depend on who I get interest from.
Yeah.
So we're working with the Food Equity Council, like I said, and they said we can use their offices. They have ideas for spaces kind of like in different parts of the county. So it will kind of just depend on who I get and try to make it as easy as possible for people. And working with Sydney's gone, but now we're working with Julia, and probably ask Kim's feedback too, and kind of just figure out locations and times. So it would kind of just depend on people's like availability, but definitely if Zoom is easy, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
And
But I mean, besides the compensation, like I do think it's really important to obviously to give your feedback on these kinds of things. And so I'm hoping that we'll get at least, 20 or 25 people at least to participate so that we can, I don't know. I just think urban agriculture is a really important sector to look at when kind of just like looking at the whole food system. So I'm hoping that I will be able to get some perspectives from you. So yeah, feel free to email me with questions or ideas, or put me in contact with people or whatever. I'm going to be done grading in a few days, so I will have time to think about this a little bit more. All right, I don't want to take up more time, so just send me an email if you have any other questions. And thank you again, Kim and Arman, for letting me crash your open mic.
Thanks for joining us, Caroline. Question for you. Could you just briefly explain some of your past research on urban ag?
Sure.
Folks here might be interested to hear a little bit more about some of the past stuff that you've done.
Yeah, and actually, I think Linda was one of our interviewees.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I was.
Yes, you were. Yeah, so God, we collected data, what was it, like 2 years ago now, I think. My past research that was in Prince George's County was about COVID impacts on urban agriculture and how urban farmers and community gardeners and school gardens actually adapted or were adapting. And it was in the first few months of the pandemic. And I owe everyone an email with kind of just like an executive summary and a link to the one article that we've gotten published from that, just sharing the findings. So that was really interesting. And even though it was such a specific topic related to COVID, a lot of what came out of it, I think, is distribution obstacles. And of course, because it was COVID, but I do think like the distribution obstacles seem like they are persistent even before and after COVID from what we heard. And that one was actually in Prince George's County and DC and Arlington, Virginia. And we were able to do interviews with about 79 urban farmers and gardeners. So it was really interesting. And I'm really interested now in distribution and kind of like taking a deeper dive into the distribution issues. And I'm hoping with the focus groups, we can really kind of get more of a detailed picture on that. I have other research experience, but not in Prince George's County. In DC, I have a study on community gardens and how they can support food insecure individuals from a nutritional point of view. So kind of like the nutritional gaps in just like the population and some neighborhoods, and kind of like what crops would be needed from community gardens to support, if they're donating to food banks and things like that. Yeah, so those are kind of my recent urban ag studies, and I'm excited to learn more because I think I'm like really, really optimistic about urban ag. I know it can't like feed everybody, obviously, but I think that like in Prince George's County, there's just huge potential. And I think there's such an interest in it. It's really growing. There's so much support from people like Kim and policy support. And I think that there's just a lot of potential, and it's just awesome. Like, it's just awesome how many people are getting interested in doing urban farming in the county. So I think we need to kind of look at the, issues and try to, I don't know, work on the system, I guess. And so hopefully I can help a little bit. All right.
But I wanted to mention too that Liz Robinson, who's on with us tonight, she's one of the co-chairs for the Urban Farm Support Committee with the Food Equity Council. So you'll be interfacing with her as well. I don't know, Liz, if you want to come on video for a minute and say hi to Carolyn, but yeah, she's working with that, and also Extension's Urban Ag Work Group. She chairs that.
Yeah, and there was like an advisory or working group or something for Prince George's and Anne Arundel County urban farmers that I was getting lots of emails. I was on that email list, and I was getting emails. Was that still going on?
Yeah, but we kind of got to a point where a lot of groups, I think, where it's like you want it to be meaningful and you have to consistently redefine what the group needs to be. So I think we need to really do that once the growing season sort of like we're over the hill on that. So I'm thinking the fall time frame will reassess. But I think it was helpful for a lot of folks, especially just to be able to network and then distribute information even via email, like from stuff that Kim gets and just stuff back and forth. And I will say, like, it gave me an opportunity to hear from a lot of different farmers in the region and to kind of get a feel for what people's barriers were. So I don't want to speak on anyone else's behalf, but I'm happy to share just some of the information that I received like in doing that group, and then also being with the Food Equity Council and working with SMATIC, and just kind of bringing some of those issues up to the to the plate.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, if you have time, I'll definitely send you another email. Another email about this project, and maybe we can chat on Zoom or
Yeah,
whatever.
definitely. And I'll ask, I've been kind of mentioning the project and asking for feedback, from folks. That way, if they're not able to make some of these meetings, I have some ideas.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you again for coming tonight. And
Thank
I guess
you.
we'll see you in June or July. Just keep us posted and we'll make sure we get the word out, and hopefully you'll get some folks to participate.
Yeah, just everyone email me. I hope to see you in a focus group, or if not, the Food Equity Council Advisory meeting. And thank you all again. I'm sorry I have to hop off, but thanks again, and have a good rest of your meeting.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Arman, it is your turn. Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. And please do talk a little bit about, what you're doing with your farm and your farm business. And yeah, we're excited that you could present tonight, and we look forward to hearing more about your work. I will have to say, let me give a plug for you. I've been to Arman's farm to do some conservation planning, and honestly, I was basically just documenting what he's already doing. And he has stuff that maybe doesn't necessarily meet NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service standards, as many small scale operations don't necessarily meet that, but he really has some creative ways of using stormwater. So I'm really excited and delighted that he agreed to participate tonight and present. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, as I said before, I don't have any pictures of my farm right now, but yes, I run a 1/8 of an acre farm, and it's it's mostly like fruit trees and shrubs and herbs. We'd love to have you all come over one day. Okay. I'm gonna try to figure out how to share my screen. There, that works. All right, can you all see my screen? Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so yeah, I'm just going to talk about stormwater management. And again, my name is Arman Milanian. I run a farm called Ray-Honay Farm in Hyattsville, and I also run a design company, edible landscape design company called Dandelion Foodscapes. Yeah, so we're going to be mostly going to be talking about stormwater basics, some solutions, and even how to filter that water for agricultural purposes, and I'm going to share some resources as well. This is an interesting photo. This is in College Park. Some students just floating on the stormwater that's passing through one of the streets in College Park near the campus. Just to show like how much water we're going to have. There's this concept called watersheds. I'm sure a lot of you know about it. So we are in part of a bigger watershed called Chesapeake Bay. So basically what that means is water flowing through surfaces and ending up into a stream or river. There's a boundary that defines that water flow, and that's called a watershed. And you can kind of see that on the figure to your left. The white dotted lines showcase a watershed boundary and where that water travels from the city and suburbs, from farms and factories and so on, and wetlands into a river and back into the ocean. And watersheds can be different sizes. So for instance, I live in part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed that's called Anacostia River watershed. So watersheds have different smaller versions as well. Also, you can think about your house, your property as a smaller watershed as well, where you can design the flow of water to your property. I'm going to show how to do that in next slides. Also wanted to talk about water cycle, which I'm sure we all seen before, but basically we have evaporation from rivers, streams, and ponds and ocean, and condensation creating clouds, and then ending up as precipitation through rain or snow, and then running off back into that whole system as a cycle. And interestingly, trees also contribute to that, where you have trees sort of using capillary action and sucking up water into their leaves and using transpiration to release particles that help with seeding clouds to cause rain to fall. So it's a complex system, and it's a sort of a loop. And climate change has been affecting that. So we're having more erosion problems due to increased heat, where we have more evaporation happening, more moisture is captured into the air and atmosphere, and higher rainfall in our area, and some areas no rainfall, and changing that pattern. So the intensity of the rain is changing. And our cities infrastructure are adapting to that, but also our farms need to be able to adapt as well. So this is just some data to show. And this is from PG County Climate Action Plan that was put together in 2021. As you can see to my left, bottom half is kind of shows our the mean years of how much rain or dryness we have. And as you can see, we're getting more wettest years since the 2000s, and compared to years before where we had driest years. And the graph to the top shows, interestingly, that in spring, our springs are getting drier in terms of rainfall, or kind of staying within the same range, and that's the yellow regression line. And then we have our winter, summers, and falls have like a sloped increasing regression line showing increase in rainfall. And basically, we're expecting about 4.4% increase in flood risks in the next 30 years. And that's going to cost a lot of money due to damages. And you can see more info, and I have the links here, and I'll share this document, and you can click on the links and read more about them. So how do we manage that? There's lots of solutions. The main thing is to harvest the rain, right? So we have a lot of impermeable surfaces in our current city structures. So we have roads that are paved, and we have soils that are compacted, and a lot of roof surfaces that are not capturing any water. And all of that is just washing off. And the best way to manage it is through capturing that water through rain barrels or cisterns or bioretention ponds, or even doing earthworks, where you're just changing your topography of your land, or your grading, such that it captures more water, and collecting water through the roofs and walls of our infrastructures. And it is good practice to learn how we can filter that for agricultural purposes, even though I read some studies where plants that produce fruit bearing portions such as and they're perennial, such as apples, berries, and whatnot. They accumulate less harmful minerals or harmful compounds in their fruit portion and seeds, but mostly store it in their body of the plant, stalks or roots, as compared to plants that you eat the leaves. So the ones that have you eat the leaves, such as broccoli, kale, whatnot, they will have more contaminants in their leaf. So we want to figure out how to filter that water for urban ag use. There's this great book that I'm going to mention later as well, but it's called Rainwater Harvesting in Drylands and Beyond by Brad Lancaster. And he recommends 8 principles to start with your stormwater management design. And that starts with a long and thoughtful observation where you kind of sit down and watch how water flows through your system and just observing where the water piles up, how the water moves through your roof system and where does it end up, and things like that, and understanding your watershed system and how your house is connected to that. And then starting your design through looking at the highest point of your watershed, and then looking at your property, and maybe your rooftop is the highest point of your land, or maybe there's a hill that's the highest point, and then starting from there and designing your water harvesting system from there. And always starting small and simple is the best way, so you can easily install and observe and tweak things as needed. And you always want to spread and infiltrate the water so that you're capturing as much water as possible and using it for growing crops. And always plan for an overflow. Water is really powerful force, and it can move things, move houses, move structures. So figuring out how to allow that force to move around and divert into your current stormwater management by the city is really important. And then maximizing living and organic ground cover. So, planting in those, figuring out what type of plants you can grow, both for harvesting as well as for creating more habitat and preventing erosion and collecting all of that water through organic matter. It's really important to mitigate our storm and help with stormwater management. And then stacking functions. That's a good one, where you are kind of connecting all these systems that you design in your plans to one another, such that maximizing the amount of water that you're capturing by stacking different elements to one another and connecting them, and continuously reassess and tweak things and kind of monitoring things and maintaining elements in your stormwater management so that it works optimally and continuously improves. And talking about rain barrels and cisterns, this is a good example of a rain barrel being used in agricultural settings, where basically you want to harvest. There's a link in the resource section where you can kind of figure out how much rain your impermeable surfaces can collect, such as roofs, and then calculating the size of the rain barrel, or so it helps you with figuring out how much rain you can harvest. And main concepts here is that adding screens to your gutters, and there's this other concept where adding sloped screens as a continuation of your gutter outflow to prevent a lot of larger debris from the roofs to end up in your tank. and then having a first flush diverter, and that's an important part where as the water comes down from the roof, it goes into the first flush diverter, and it carries a lot of sediments still with it, and that sediment ends up in this first flush diverter, and it slowly sips out water. And then when that gets filled up, then you end up with clean water, and then every now and then you have to clean up and open. There's like you can add like a screw type PVC piping that have like a screw type ending where you can take that out and adjust the dripping, and then cleaning that up every now and then. And you end up with clean water going into your tanks and smaller sediments in the bottom, and you want to have your spigot outlet a little bit higher to the bottom of your tank so that you always have clean water for usage. And always you want to have an outflow, because if you can't take more than what it's being introduced, you want to have it out of your way so you're not having to deal with the water force. And some of these tanks have access to them, so you can, every winter, you have to clean the tanks and empty them in our climate, because freezing could damage your tanks. And some, I've seen also other designs where there's an air outlet on the top of the tank, because sometimes some openings are closed and you want to have air outside of your tank, because that's going to pressurize your tank, and that's going to be, again, affecting your tank in the long run. And if you don't have any roof surfaces to collect water, and it's in a, you want to have access to water in the middle of a field, there's this other concept where you can create a funnel and attach it to the top of a rain barrel and collect water that way. And I've seen that in if you come to Forested, we have something similar to this for the community garden section of the farm, where people are sort of just using this sort of funnel element to collect water for their vegetable gardens. And you can even go further with engineering bioretention ponds. Normally I've seen these done by engineers, but the concept is pretty simple. So you dig a pond about normally 2 to 3 feet deep, and then you have different elements added to that pond. You have some sort of gravel on the bottom, you have different growing media in that pond area, and then you have a water level outflow, so that water stays within desired level into your retention pond, and then exits through an outlet into either the municipality stormwater, or just an outlet outside of your property. That way you're not damaging the system, and also like allowing a lot of water to get absorbed by the media that's in there. Another concept is that I've seen a lot in the cities is bioretention swales, similar concept as retention ponds, but it's more linear. And then an easier one that I've done myself is rain gardens. Pretty similar concept, but instead of having piping in the system, you don't have that. You have water coming in, again, 2 to 3 feet deep. Here it says 1 feet as well, but I usually do 2 to 3 feet deep. And you fill that up with garden soil works well, but you can also buy rain garden soil mixes online normally, and then you top it up with mulch, and then you have plants inside of it, such as if I were to plant edibles, I would do aronia berries or elderberries or wildflowers mixes and milkweeds, for instance, to create habitat. And then you want to have an outflow or an overflow for your system where when the water reaches a desired level, it passes out through some sort of gravel so that you're preventing erosion from happening. Yeah, that's an easy concept to implement if you want to do it yourself. There's also the concept of earthworks, which rain gardens also fall into. For instance, a house, a normal suburban house where there's mostly impermeable surfaces, you're just going to have water running off and eroding and carrying a lot of sediments and causing damages. And where you can change that system by creating more permeable surfaces, pathways, walkways, and creating different shapes in the earth to capture a lot of that water and plant in those systems so that you are utilizing that resource and growing I grow edible crops into those systems. One thing that I've done in my yard a lot is I have a sloped backyard and I've created these concept called swales where based on contour of your land, you create a trench on contour and water travels 90 degrees along contour. And every time water washes off from an impermeable surface, as it comes down through that slope, goes into the swale and stays in the swale and then has a overflow. And I have 5 swales right now. Yeah. And it goes into different swales in my yard. And with the swales, you're going to have a berm. So that's the soil you cut out, you dug out. My swales are about 1 feet deep. And then I put that soil in front of this, swale on the lower end of the slope. And I planted grasses in that, but in here you can also do legumes. And I planted fruit trees next to it. So I have apples, persimmons, blueberries. And every now and then I come in and cut all those grasses and just feed it back to those plants. And as you can see over the years, you're going to have water trickling down and slowly seeping into your soil so you don't need to water your plants as often anymore. I don't water my garden anymore. You can also grow vegetables in that system too. So a lot of the filtration is happening in the soil. Speaking of stacking functions, you can have your rainwater from the gutters connected to a rain barrel or cistern, and then that cistern is connected to different earthworks, swales, and ditches where you're growing trees and crops, and then out and outflow into like a meadow or like a pollinator garden. So you're using all that resource, and again, you just want to have an outflow so that you're not capturing the force of water. Obviously, having more green surfaces on our building structures also helps. Having green roofs, it's an old concept, and there's this picture on the lower right, and that's done in British Isles, I think. And you can have walls that are green. There's these different concepts where you can have your one thing I'm trying in my yard is capturing the rain from the gutters and having it go through a wall garden, and then growing crops in that, or even on rooftops, where this shows an example of a typical green roof, where it has multiple elements to prevent the roof damage, having damages to your roof. But there's also other concept for growing vegetables where it's called a wicking bed. Very similar to the retention ponds, but you have grow beds where you have an outflow and a gravel section with a piping where you introduce water and the water fills up to the top layer of the gravel, and then you have some sort of textile, geotextile, or sometimes they use these food grade plastic separators, and then you fill the top with compost and you grow vegetables in there, and you usually have like a indentation into the reservoir where the water sort of wicks into the compost and waters your plants. And then you can have the outflow connected to another unit of these, and then have the last outflow flowing outside of your roof system. Or you can even implement these on grounds too. And these are really easy to grow vegetables and not worrying about watering much. Another concept would be to like add a funnel to the inlet, capturing rain. These are some examples of rainwater harvesting. So this is in UDC.
Hey, Arman,
Yes.
can I interrupt you just for a second? I didn't want to lose sight of one of the questions in the chat box before you got
Sure.
far ahead. Victoria asked, can you speak on the swales that have collapsed due to the absorption of water beneath them permeating the downslope? I've heard that's a danger of swales on slopes. Didn't know if you could address that.
Yeah, so you want to make sure the soil you're using to permeate water in is sufficient, so it's not too sandy. I think that's where some of the problems may occur with swales. And yeah, I'm not 100% sure about those the collapsing. I need to do more research myself, but something I have experience with is when I dealt with sandy soil, that's where I've had lost some of my swales. But yeah, I mean, I can look into that and get back to you on that. I would be interested to do more research on that. Yeah, and yeah, so I was showing this example. This is UDC. This was engineered. So basically an engineering company came in and designed this retention pond for the school. So basically, this is a bioswale going into a retention pond. And you can see these PVC pipes here, and that one in particular, these are where the water level is defined. So the water seeps out of these portions into some sort of outflow somewhere outside of the property. And you can see these gravel sections. These are kind of helping slowing down the water as it gets to the retention pond. And you can also make structures with those. It's called gabions, where you create a wall with the stone, and that helps with reducing sediments and as well as slowing down water. And that's what these stone walls are. And here are some examples of what I've done for clients. So this one all the way to the right is sort of a flat land in DC where I dug a trench and I filled it with wood chips. And what wood chips do for me here, it both acts as a pathway and as well as a sponge layer. So this is a 1 feet deep swale with 1 feet deep mulched area, and I planted blueberries, persimmons, and vegetable garden, and this is called an herb spiral, where different kind of Mediterranean style herbs would grow. And yeah, so basically this swale is watering everything here, and I only visited this site once a week to just do a little bit of weeding. but I didn't have to worry about watering. This is another one where the client, these two pictures to the left are another one where the client had erosion problems. And I created two different kinds of swale. So this swale in particular receives water from the roof and through a PVC piping underground goes into the first swale and another PVC pipe to the second swale and another PVC pipe here to the it's like this one in the middle. I sort of dug a hole in the ground and filled it with stone, and then exits out into the street and then goes into the watershed of the city. But that, and then on these berm areas, I planted mountain mint, wild bergamots, blueberries, wild basil, and thinking about for pollination, I planted Rudbeckia, black eye Susans of different kinds, coreopsis, and so that holds the swales and as well as sucks up a lot of that water that's going to be retained in these stone filled swales. And on the other side, I created a different version where the water comes in from the walking pathway of the property through these stone entrances, and then it goes into different swales and then out towards the outside of the property where I'm trying to bring grasses back here to again slow down the water. And again here planted a bunch of native flowers, blackberries, wild ginger, strawberries, and beauty berries, which both interestingly are both edible for humans and birds. So both creating habitat and an edible landscape. And in terms of water filtration, there's a lot of concepts out there. An easiest concept is using sandboxes. That's what they called, I think. And it's basically having a cylinder with different layers of particles of different sizes. So you can have clay, charcoal, different kinds of stone, and sand, and then having like a gravel bottom section where you have the clean water as it goes down through gravity and separating all the sediments and debris and impurities, and then you having a outlet spigot from the bottom to the outside where you can harness that clean water for usage. So you can kind of connect these systems to your rain barrel systems and having that water going into your vegetable gardens. Another concept, if you want to do it on the ground, is reed beds, where you have water coming in from an inflow into a bed that's on a 1 degree slope usually. You fill it with sand and gravel and a bit of growing media, and you plant usually plants that are used for reeds, to the reeds, grasses, cattail, plants that can handle a lot of water. And a lot of these plants, what they do, and this system similarly works like an aquaponics. So you have bacteria, different enzymes working together and cleaning that water. And then you have a sediment trap and an outflow, an overflow essentially, where if the water gets too full in here, it overflows to another area. And then here you're helping aerating the water and capturing a lot of sediments, and then you have an outflow to your growing beds. This is a newer version of that same concept with more aeration pipes, as you can see, to help increase the bacterial movement or like water filtration system in the reed beds. So you can literally build these in grounds, and I've seen these done in projects for helping rural farmers in third world countries to help clean water for both usage for toilets or like farming. And then this is a more complex idea that was taught by this guy to your left in the bottom. His name is John Todd. He recently passed away, I think 2017. He was a professor at University of Vermont, and he talked a lot about and invented this concept of living machines, where you have anaerobic and aerobic reactors to collect water with sediments, and affluent water in particular, and having it go through different plant media that he found out by going to habitats near his watershed and seeing different plants growing in water, and using those plants to filter out oils, benzene, and different elements through using different plant stages, and having even animals involved. So he had fish growing in one of these tanks, or oysters or clams growing in another tank, or even crawfish. And each stage was taking out different sediments, different impurities, minerals, and whatnot. And you would end up with clean water for usage. He himself had drank those. I don't recommend drinking any of this water, but he used it for also irrigation as well. And if you are interested more about that, you can visit University of Vermont. They have a functioning one of these machines going. We used to have one in Berlin, Maryland. It was done for I think it was a cattle farm, and all the affluents from the cows were going into this pond, and then it was being pumped from that pond into the system. And since it's a really high maintenance system, unfortunately, but since nobody was taking care of that system, so it's kind of now rogue. And they have fenced off that place, so I can't even go see it. Yeah, so these are some resources. This is to the right, that's the book I'm talking about, Rainwater Harvesting. It has 3 volumes. It's pretty comprehensive. And these are some other books that I would recommend for learning more about rainwater harvesting, and how to use that rain as an important resource. And I've included a lot more links from Chesapeake. Right here we have a rain check rebate in PG County, where you would get rebate for installing rain gardens, planting trees, installing rain barrels. And I actually got approved for the rain barrel, and I'm installing a cistern. Actually, I'm installing a 500-gallon rain barrel in my yard. I don't have pictures to show because it's not done yet, but yeah, but I'm getting a rebate, and it's $2 per gallon amount of money you're gonna get. And I also included a resource about how to manage mosquitoes, because if you're holding water and that's not moving, you're gonna end up with having mosquitoes. So there's different methods of trapping those mosquitoes, especially this last link here that provides more detail on that, and the other links are there to show more information if you're interested. Yeah, any other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions, but yeah, I'm opening the
I have
floor.
some.
Yes, go ahead.
This is super interesting. I mean, it's so much information. Thank you so
Yes.
much. What would you recommend for a property that has a well system? Do you have to consider balancing what goes down into that like watershed well, system versus what you kind of divert? Like, what are your thoughts on all that? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, so with wells, I would definitely start with do a test of, I mean, I don't know if you've done test on your water and figure out if there are any contaminants or if there are any issues with it. And then I love the idea of using reed beds. And it's very similar to that living machine concept, but it's less moving parts. With the living machines, they have pumps moving water. So it's more maintenance, but reed beds work perfect. And then you can have, for instance, water from, if there's contaminants that you don't want, going through a reed bed, and then you have to research on what kind of plants would take on some of these contaminants and plant those plants in your reed bed. You can even do your reed bed into different stages, but having it such that one level is higher than the other one, so that gravity moves water from one to another. So that way you're taking a lot of those contaminants and you're allowing that water to sit in different stages for a little bit so that the natural process is happening. And then you end up with water that can be useful for what your intentions are with that.
That's a good idea. And as far as capturing stormwater in like cisterns or rain barrels versus just letting it fall through the water table, is that any issue that you think that like it wouldn't take that much water out of your well system if you're just capturing it into cisterns, right?
Depends. I don't know. So if you're allowing that water from your rain barrels to overflow into your ground where your well system is, you're kind of capturing some of that water, but you're feeding it back to your well. So I think, so we get about, last time I checked, about 24,000 gallons of water each year, roughly, in our area. So out of that 24 gallons, if you were to take, I don't know, 50 gallons or 200 gallons monthly, you still have a lot more that's going back to your system. So I don't think you're gonna have that much problem. You're reducing the runoff by adding the rain barrel. And the idea is to, again, slow down the water, let it seep into the ground. So I think after the rain barrel, adding like earthworks to slow down that water to rejuvenate your well system, I think that would work perfectly.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
I have a question about the water filtration slides that you used and the idea that you shared about having clams, crawfish, other fish to clean that water or filter the water. There's also what's it called? Aquaponics.
Yep.
That uses fish, correct? To do that same process.
Yeah.
So that is a form of farming. And I just wonder what the opportunities are out there with USDA. But that was a really interesting. Yes, this was a really interesting slide and concept. I'm kind of, I guess it's a rabbit hole. I have to go down and do some research, but that was really good information.
Yeah,
I was thinking along the same lines too, like, could you grow food crops in those
sure.
two, figure 3 and 4? Are there food crops that could be grown in that method? Like almost like she was saying, like aquaponics or hydroponics?
For sure. So a lot of the system kind of works like aquaponics. So the water kind of goes through a loop through the system constantly until it gets to a clean level, and then it is pumped out for usage. Normally what I've seen this system is used for is affluent, so water that's coming from I don't know, poultry farming or animal farming, or even this guy John Todd had done it for the university, one of the bathrooms in the university. So and that water, it definitely in some of these stages can be diverted for usage in aquaculture or aquaponics. I've seen it done. He was growing bananas in some of his designs. So yeah, and he usually puts them in a greenhouse because Vermont is kind of cold. And you can see more info on, it's called Living Machines or Eco Machines. And if you pair that on your Google search with John Todd, it's TUDD, I believe. Yeah, John Todd. I don't have the book here, but yeah, it's TUDD. And there'll be a ton of information. And I think one of his grad students has a few YouTube videos on how he built one of these. Yeah. Any other questions?
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
It's regarding the same water filtration, which I've seen this,
Mhm.
and I thought it was an interesting concept.
Mhm.
As it relates to using something like this on a homeowner scale,
Mhm.
is it even possible? And then the question is, with regard to getting contaminants off the roof, like
Mhm.
the funnel, I think is probably a safer bet than if you have the roof water coming down and with all those other contaminants in it. Because how long would it take for that filtration with that water to be processed?
Yeah, that is a fair point. So there's different approaches. So I've seen so there's, as the water is entering your watershed, you have to think about where it's entering, right? So normally the roofs of a lot of the houses are made with these plastic field type roofing shingles.
Asphalt shingles.
Asphalt shingles, yeah, sorry, thank you. Asphalt shingles, and they always have particles being washed off into your gutters. You can change your roofing system into metal or something, or those clay type ones, or I've seen in Bermuda, what they've done is they put a layer of lime on their roof system. And what lime does, it reacts with the rainwater. It's because it's slightly acidic, so makes it more alkaline, and also helps with filtration. And then since in Bermuda they don't have municipality water easily, they a lot of houses collect water from the roof.
Absolutely.
And that water goes into a tank and then it goes into a filtration. There's this, I'm sure you all have heard of RO filters with reverse osmosis filters.
Yeah.
And then that's used for house usage. Yeah, so you can even add reverse osmosis to the systems if you want to think more. But and reverse osmosis, basically, it's like a cylindrical membrane with really tiny holes where water is pushed in with high pressure, and what that does, it separates particles from that water due to the pressure, and clean water droplets are coming out of the system, and then all those droplets are collected for usage, for drinking. And yeah, and in terms of just using these systems for in suburbs, this guy John Todd, his house in Vermont, all he did was just bought a bunch of these like food grade blue barrels, and he had a few of them outside of his house, and he had the water going through different stages. And he figured, like, you know, I think he was doing, and think about it, this complex system is for affluent water. If you're collecting rainwater, it has less contaminants compared to manure. So you don't need as many stages for cleaning. So and reed beds I've seen a lot in I've seen it in desert climates a lot, because it also helps with yeah, in one of the projects I went to, they were using it, and you can make it small, large. So it was like a farm with like a restaurant in it, and right next to the restaurant, all the kitchen water was going into the reed bed, and then from the reed bed was diverted into swales that were watering different trees. Yeah,
Nice. Thank you.
of course.
How much do you expect that cistern that you're system that you're building for yourself? How much of that, I believe you said it was 500 gallons, to work for what you needed to work for? Like, how long would, if it's full, would that cistern provide what you needed to provide?
Right. So right now my farm complexity is becoming, my farm is becoming more complex. So I currently have a 50-gallon rainwater barrel, and I've right now, even though we had some rain this past week, it's half full now, less than half full. So I'm using a lot of water, and establishing trees and plants in the beginning takes a lot of water to establishing them. I'm expecting to use that 500-gallon both for experimentation. I really want to build one of those filtration systems. I want to experiment with all these filtration systems in my backyard. And I want to learn how to use that water for indoor consumption as well. So it's not, my goal isn't just for farming, but also for indoor usage as well. So if I want to wash the vegetables that I'm collecting from my farm, I would have a sink attached to my rain barrel and through this filtration, and just washing it off outside, and then, you know, packaging it, whatnot. That's kind of my goal. But yeah, it is important to know why you need a rain barrel and how big your rain barrel should be. Knowing the amount of water you're going to be using, it's really important.
What recommendations do you have for that as far as determining how much water you're really going to need?
Depends on your scale. If you have perennial crops, you don't need that much water. If you just do a little bit of earthworks, in my view, you can figure out your water needs for your perennials. But if you have annuals, they're really water hungry, especially in summer times in our area. So connecting these tanks with a drip irrigation, you know, even adding, instead of one spigot, a sort of splitter where one is connected to a timer of some sort, and then connect to an irrigation system, so that the water is, your tank is not always at full capacity, but always watering your vegetable garden. There's a lot of things to consider for determining your size. I would suggest researching the plants they're using and how water hungry they are, and then using that to calculate how much water you need to collect based on your roof size. And keep in mind, water has weight, has a really you have to keep in mind water weight. If you're doing 50, and that's why I suggest starting small. So if you're doing 50-gallon barrel, you can just use a bunch of cinder blocks and you'll be fine. But if you're using right now, I am struggling with a platform for my basically 2-ton rain cistern. You can, so figuring out where is that going to go. You can either use gravity fed, which I'm trying to do gravity fed, or you can do pumps. So you basically dig a hole in the ground and have your water tank into the ground and then pumping it out. That's another way to tackle that problem. But weight of the water tank is important. And knowing that, one engineer told me that, so soil, wherever you have soil and then you put pressure on that soil, the soils on the outside of that point of pressure are going to move. So soil acts like a sponge. As you push your finger into a sponge, the other side of the sponge bulge. So knowing how to spread that force so that you get less bulging, and having a large water tank next to your house, and not wanting to damage your house foundation. It's really important to know, okay, what size barrel can I deal with? Those are all some of the factors you need to consider for the size you're going to have. And I always recommend starting small. I started with 50-gallon and now I'm trying to go larger, but I think I went too fast. But yeah, I hope that helped.
That's really good information.
Yeah, super helpful. Like, it sounds like the bottom line that we need to understand is consult a professional.
For sure. And there's if you go on rain rebates program for PG County, it's by Chesapeake Bay Foundation, I think. They have a list of professionals that can help you with installing all these different components. Now I'm not particularly sure about them installing swales and earthworks and like filtration.
That's
But
what
they'll
you're for.
Yeah, that's
I
what I
can
do.
tell you that Eco Oasis
Mhm.
has a program.
Eco Oasis.
Yes, and I actually worked with, long story short, I went out to certify somebody's home
Mhm,
for Baywise practices for the county.
mhm.
And in looking at the woman's landscape, I said, "You had a water problem." She says, "You're pretty good." I said, "Well, it's right here. You have no grass. You have grass on this side. You have no grass on this side." It started to grow back. But as she explained, the same thing that you're talking about here, the mechanism of having the water channel. Now,
Mhm,
I am the lowest house of 4
mhm.
houses, so I get all of their water.
Yes.
And I had dug trenches, an 8-foot trench myself, 8 foot by 8 feet down
Mhm,
by 14 feet out. So that I was trying to mitigate the water coming in and then making all the amendments. The challenge is that, just as you said, you can create the diverters, but people that did it didn't know what they were doing. So they put the black channel in the ground with the holes, but they didn't shore it up. You have to put rocks in there so that it filters properly. So now after all this time, you have a water backup, and you have to really pay attention. So in my landscape, I probably had a couple of garden beds back there. Now I have almost 10, because it's like, this water is going to come in the house. We're going to use all of it. And the energy of how much water comes in, it's all being used now. As you said, I don't water outside a whole lot, because as it rains, it filters straight down, and it's on a slope. So every bed gets watered. But the challenge is that you also don't want to be walking in mud puddles. So it's to have someone come in, and the county will come out. I can tell people who live in Prince George's County, because I've had them come here and assist with what are the practices that I could put in that are not something I've already done, that you could recommend for better. And what you have talked about here is exactly what they talk about. So it's really nice to know that I actually know someone that I could put some money into your till, rather than calling some stranger that doesn't know what they're doing and you can't call them back. There's a conversation about conservation and understanding these practices. So this has been so worthwhile, because suffering the water of the neighbors and diverting their water is just step one. It's about how you do the rest of it. I have 2 50-gallon rain barrels. Well, no, I have 3. One I have is an open barrel, similar to what you have. And then I have 2 of them connected to the downspouts. And I think it captures water, but it's literally about how you shift. So what you showed here, this particular one that we're looking at, that's what part of my yard had looked like. It had grass, but then all of the grass was gone. I said, I don't care about grass anyway, but growing food, that's a different story. So all of those areas now have garden beds. And it's about how you take what we get for free, because in other countries like France, they're having a water shortage. You know, in Seattle, I just got off the phone with a friend. They're having a water shortage too. There's certain things you can't do anymore. And we have to pay attention, because water is our major resource. And if we get to the point of that filtration that you showed, that is everything. That is everything. Thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah, and interestingly, even though we are getting a lot of rain in our part of the country, our water table is getting lower, because a lot of that water is being pumped out and used for unfortunately monocrop agriculture. And yeah, that's a big problem, and we need to address that.
I know Liz had some questions about NRCS's program versus rain check rebate. And I will say NRC, like this would fall under, there is a stormwater control practice. I forget the number for the practice. But I will say, I think it's 570 stormwater runoff control. So there are NRCS technicians that can design some of this stuff, but I will say that a lot of them are used to working on a larger scale. And you know, with more space, you know, to design some of these things. And I will also say they're not always thinking about food safety. So what I like about your presentation, Arman, is that you've taken all of those into consideration in terms of small spaces, food safety, and I'll talk about some other research around that in a moment. So, you know, I would suggest to you to maybe even consider, you know, becoming a, you know, there's folks that can work with NRCS to become what we call TSPs, technical service providers. They can actually, you know, pay the technical service provider directly, you know, for some of their contracting services or consulting services. So we do have some folks in our office that can design some of this stuff, and that is free, but, you know, our office doesn't do any of the actual contract work or implementation. And in terms of the rates, Liz, it really depends. Actually, Colleen, our district conservationist, and we have a meeting tomorrow with some of the folks at the national level who are looking at some of the rates for small scale farms and urban farms. So these are some of the things that we want to chat with them about to see, are they, you know, going to be competitive with some of the, you know, the county-based programs for rain check rebate, you know, and whatnot. So hopefully we'll have more information on that, Liz, a little bit later. Currently, we don't have a whole lot on that, and I don't know that it would be as competitive with the rain check rebate program, like I want to say there was a fairly low amount for rain gardens, like $1 a square foot, which I mean, I don't even know if that buys you a plant. So we need to we need to talk about these sorts of things. So that's something that we're going to discuss tomorrow. Also, I wanted to mention that, and I'll drop this stuff in the chat box. There is a researcher with the University of Maryland who just received some funding for rainwater harvesting and food safety concerns. She's specifically looking at pathogens. So, none of the, oh my gosh, what are they called? PHAs or whatever, from asphalt shingles and things like that. So she has, I think, 3 different surfaces she's collecting off of, high tunnel, the polyethylene plastic, asphalt shingles, and I think metal roofs to kind of look at whether or not there is a significant pathogen concern, if we even need filtration systems. So that's something that she's going to look at a site in Baltimore, and then also a site in Prince George's County at Extension's Research Farm. And then she's working with some USDA folks who have designed some iron filter or iron filing filters. So hopefully we'll have some more information on that in terms of, from a food safety perspective, because as you know, folks have to, should at least try to comply with the produce safety rule, although you're technically not required until you're making, I believe it's 28 grand or more a year. But still, no one wants, their customers to get sick or anything like that. So it's good to implement some of these best practices. So once we have that information, my plan is to talk to NRCS, our state conservationists, as well as the folks at DOE who are doing the rain check rebate program, and see if filtration is necessary, can we increase the rates that folks are getting on the rebate to allow for those filtration systems? So anyway, I'll share that information. And Arman, I'd love to connect you with Rachel.
I would love
That's
that.
okay.
I would love that, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if she's still taking people on her advisory panel or not, but it would be wonderful to at least have you guys connect, because I have a feeling she's going to be doing, more research on this beyond this project. This is a very short project, not a whole, ton of money. So maybe you could collaborate with her on some additional projects down the road. And I would love to share your slides, with the group. That's okay as well. And I could put on the Google Drive because you have some really great resources here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I put a lot of links in it.
Oh, one of the things I wanted to tell you guys is that the county has a stormwater management program that it's literally they're training. There's some master gardeners or people that were interested in participating, and they're doing trainings presently. So we attended one already. We have another one tomorrow, and then a practicum. And what they're doing is creating apps. There's an app that they're creating. So literally to help the residents of the county with stormwater management issues, right down to as Arman was talking about, where your water table is at your home, and then what you could do to mitigate some of those issues. So I thought it was pretty interesting, and I will bring more back because I'm going through the training now, but they're developing apps that would be very helpful for us as urban farmers to know what your water looks like where you are and how to mitigate what it is and how they could be of assistance, because they're coming out and doing assessments also specifically for stormwater issues. So I just wanted to remember to share that.
Awesome.
Kim and Arman, I also wanted to ask you, while we're talking about water filtration, if there is a concern about air pollution. I'm a 70s baby, and I remember in the 80s hearing about acid rain. So just wondering what your thoughts would be, especially as you have these discussions, speak with each other about the need to test for certain things, especially in the city, being in the city.
Yeah. Overall, rain is a little bit acidic, and compounds that we have in our air, such as CO2, reacts with the water that's coming down from the clouds and changes that, right? We have all heard about ocean acidification, right? So, that's where there's, as I mentioned, like in Bermuda, they use lime, like there are different methods of changing that water acidity. But yeah, I mean, pollution is a big problem, but at the same time, think about a lot of the hydrocarbons that are being washed with the rain. They're organic matter, they're organic compounds that can be further digested by different living organisms. So you can use mushrooms, for instance, if there's this concept of using mushrooms as filtrations. So they would put like a hay bale and introduce oyster mushrooms into that hay bale, and then have that sit in a stream. I think Paul Stamets did that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just reached out to Chesapeake Bay Foundation to see if we can implement some programs like that. No lie.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love to see that. So yeah, so like rain it's gonna carry whatever's out in the atmosphere as it's falling down. But we can use different techniques to change that water structure so that it's useful for our purposes. Mushrooms, I love mushrooms because of that, because they can digest, they can break benzene. It's like a hexagonal, it's like a benzene structure, chemical structure, can be broken down by mushrooms. So there's different organisms that are able to help us with filtration. We can also use like different other techniques to filter water for agricultural purposes, but definitely the rain is going to carry whatever is in our atmosphere, and changing our behavior so that we're reducing pollution, and pushing our congressmen and people in the city councils to push for cleaner air, and having them abide by that. It's part of our, it should be part of our agricultural practices, I believe, because that's it's we're a living organism on this living organism planet. Yeah.
Well, we are a little past time. Thanks, folks, for hanging on a little bit later. And thank you, Arman, for presenting tonight. So appreciate you and all of the resources that you have shared. Just wanted to go around really quickly and see if anyone has any last minute burning questions. And I don't know if, Arman, if you can drop your contact information in the chat box too, in case folks want to reach out to you or even refer, other homeowners to you that might be interested in implementing some of these water conservation practices. All right. Well, I just want to go ahead and thank everyone for participating tonight. And thank you, Arman, for an awesome presentation. Urban stormwater management is something that is super important. So we appreciate you presenting on it. I know UDC has a urban farm stormwater management kit that they worked on with Kelly O'Clesson and another researcher. Kelly O'Clesson's a county resident he was a landscape architect as well. For some reason, it's not up and available at the moment, but when that becomes available again, I will let you all know. So thank you again, and we will see you in September.
Thank you all for having me.
Thanks for all the great info.